The Iliad is not a war story. It is a map of every step the soul must take in order to pass through this life, through the bios, through the experience of being human in a physical body, with a conditioned mind, with an ego that believes it is in charge. The Trojan War is not a conflict between two nations. It is the civil war of the soul. On one side, the ego, the conditioned self, the identity built from habit, from fear, from inherited belief, defended behind walls it has spent a lifetime constructing. On the other side, the awakening force, the deeper self, the part of you that knows, even when everything else insists otherwise, that there is something more than what the conditioned mind can see. This war has been going on inside every human being who has ever lived. Homer mapped it with such precision, such structural perfection, that 3,000 years later, if you know how to read it, the map still works. Every stage of the Trojan War maps onto a specific stage of initiatic transformation. Every character, every battle, every moment of crisis is a station on the soul's journey. Let's walk through it together. The war begins because of Helen. Paris takes Helen from Sparta. The Greeks sail to take her back. On the surface, a theft, a war of honor. But in the initiatic reading, the war begins because the soul has been captured by beauty. Helen is not a woman. Helen is the vision of the higher self, the glimpse of what is possible, the beauty that awakened part of you has seen and cannot forget. Paris is the ego's first response, desire, possession, the attempt to own what can never be owned. And the Greeks must sail. They have no choice. Once you have glimpsed what you truly are, you cannot unsee it. The journey has begun, whether you consent to it or not. This is the first stage of initiation, the call. The moment the soul becomes aware that something in its current life is fundamentally wrong, that the walls it leaves behind are not the truth of what it is. The war begins, not with a battle, with a recognition. The Greeks besieged Troy for 10 years, and for the first 9, almost nothing happens. 9 years of siege, 9 years of waiting, 9 years of a war that seems to go nowhere. Why? Because initiation cannot be rushed. The soul does not transform overnight. The conditioned mind does not dissolve in a single battle. The walls of Troy are ancient. They were built over a lifetime. They will not fall to a single assault. The 9 years are the long preparation, the grinding work of self-examination, the repeated confrontation with your own limitations, your own fears, your own contradictions. Every person who has ever walked a genuine path of transformation knows this period. It is not dramatic. It is not glorious. It is long and difficult. And there are many moments when the soul asks, will the walls ever fall? Homer is honest about this. The Iliad begins in year 10, at the moment of crisis within the crisis, because that is where the real initiation happens, not in the siege, in what the siege does to the soul. The Iliad opens with one word, menis, rage, the rage of Achilles. Achilles, The force of the awakened soul withdraws from the battle, and without him the Greeks begin to lose. This is the crisis of the will. The awakened soul goes silent because it has been dishonored by Agamemnon, the force of collective ego, the voice that says your individual truth doesn't matter, stay in line, be managed. And in that withdrawal, everything suffers, because the soul cannot be separated from its purpose without consequence. Then comes the fourth stage, Patroclus, Achilles' closer companion, the heart, puts on Achilles' armor and goes into battle in his place and is killed by Hector, by the false self, because in initiation, the heart must be broken open. It is only the death of Patroclus, only the grief Achilles cannot contain, that forces the awakened soul back into battle. Homer gives this moment full space. Achilles weeps. His mother comes from the sea to hold him, and in that grief, total unguarded ego dissolving, the transformation finally begins. Achilles returns with one purpose, Hector. Hector runs. 3 times he circles the walls of Troy before he turns to face Achilles, because the false self always delays the confrontation, always finds one more defense, one more wall, but in the end it turns, because the false self at its deepest level knows the confrontation is necessary, that the walls cannot hold forever. Hector falls. Homer mourns him. The poem mourns him, because the false self is not evil. It was protecting what it knew. It was doing its best, but it had to fall so that something truer could live. The Iliad ends before Troy falls. Homer stops at the funeral of Hector because the poem's work is done. It has walked you through every stage of the inner war. But we know what happens next. The walls don't fall to force, they fall to a story. A hollow horse carried inside the gates by the Trojans themselves, because the conditioned mind cannot be broken from the outside. It can only be entered through something it doesn't recognize as a threat, through a story. And this is Homer's final revelation. The Iliad itself is the Trojan horse, a story so compelling, so human, so full of grief and rage and love and beauty, that the conditioned mind carries it inside its own walls. And hidden inside the story is a complete map of what the soul must go through to wake up. 3,000 years later, the horse is still inside the gates, and the story is still doing its work. Homer, the Iliad Decoded.